better if you don't convert, it eats at you, right? Where you go like, well, this is kind of hopeless. But like you said, focus on the positive and lean into it, right? Like there's a few YouTube videos online where I played Magnus in some random blitz, and all I ever remember from that is that I drew one game. I don't tell people that there are 6 other videos after that where I lost every game, right? You just focus.
What videos?
Exactly. What videos are there? Just the first one.
Right.
So anyway, here we have an Italian, the first move on that note, switching to E4 from D4. And a symmetrical Italian until Magnus chooses the H6 variation. Ooh, and castles early. We could get a sharp one with white committing castles. That means, yeah, exactly.
Now, one of the ideas of putting the knight on C3 is to meet G5 with an early knight D5, kind of striking at the center. White could go knight D5 here anyway. White could play this in traditional style with bishop B3, which Gukesh does. And, just a relatively unambitious opening setup by the Indian Grandmaster. Just sort of a regular Italian position. So popular these days.
Let's talk a little bit about that G5. It didn't happen, but that's kind of a modern way that black can look to spice things up if you are in a must-win situation, right? White castling early and black playing H6, not just to prevent bishop G5, but to play G5. That's not happening here, but that is an idea we might see later on in this match if they keep playing this position.
Yeah, we might even see the move G5 with the king castled kingside. The fact that the king is on G8 doesn't always preclude black from pushing G5, especially if you could ensure that a knight appears on G6 and a queen appears on F6 shortly thereafter. Knight D5 by Gukesh. So normally black's reaction here is to take on D5 and then to meet bishop takes D5, Danny, with this knight E7, knight G6 maneuver. But Magnus taking a little bit of time. Maybe he's thinking about bishop E6 to keep the tension.
Okay. And this is definitely theory for those looking to improve their repertoire or map anything out. This is a symmetrical Italian kind of 4 knights idea, but there's a lot more than meets the eye. That's why Magnus is pausing. Want to make sure he gets the right shuffling in here to be fair. And I think that Gukesh, we asked the question, Danya, what will he have prepared for this match? What do you bring to the battlefield when you're prepping for a world champion? It might be an Italian. I like his position right now so far after the first 10 or so moves.
Yeah, and Gukesh has been so impressive in the opening phase in his last couple classical tournaments. Of course, none of us will ever forget his performance in the previous Olympiad. Fabiano Caruana-esque, kind of a repetition of that Singfield Cup. I think he started 8 out of 8 and only lost the next game by miracle. That was amazing, and that really put Gukesh on many players' radars. I'm a little bit surprised that Magnus took on E3, which is oftentimes a concession when the rook is on F1 aiming at the F7 pawn. But Carlsen decides, I think, that there are just not enough minor pieces here for white to really whip anything up on the king side. Okay, reasonable.
Yeah, makes sense. Normally in these positions with the F-file open, white can slide with queen E1 and over to that side of the board. But like you said, with pieces being traded, both the knight and bishop, unlikely white is really mustering up something scary on the king side. Is that what you're saying? Asking for a friend.
That is. But I would play queen E1 anyway. I like this idea. Queen E1, queen G3, and then maybe knight H4, knight F5, which you often see in these lines. Queen E2 by Gukesh, kind of taking the more slow roll approach, asking Magnus, what he wants to do with this bishop on D5. We could see bishop takes D5 at any moment, but I think white's going to take back with the C pawn and maybe even start playing on the queen side with an attack against that C7 pawn, which is going to be a backward pawn in the event of the trade.
I was going to say, on that note, what is black's strategy? Are you thinking about taking D5, or are you trying to get white to blink first? Some maneuver where you move the knight from C6 in order to play C6 yourself and force white to capture on E6. What is black's plan? Obviously, moving the knight might lose the B7 pawn. So again, asking for a friend, teach me what you know about this position.
Normally, I'd say the idea is to get white to flinch first. Here, I would seriously contemplate taking on D5, and that's because of the presence of the B4 square. Magnus goes knight B4 immediately. I thought about this, but I didn't see exactly what the idea is in response to bishop takes B7 and then back to D5. Because if we pull up an analysis board, Danny, really quickly, I think Gukesh should take on B7. The idea is that you can't, maybe you can try bishop D7 with the idea of C6. I was worried about it.
I was just going to say, there's no sacrifice on F7? What do you mean there's no sacrifice, computer? I hate you. It's good for black.
Me too. You just drop it back and you stare your opponent in the face and you say you have no follow-up here. You have 3 pawns.
What Magnus... Oh my gosh. This is what Magnus has already looked at. We see in the live position right below our cameras here that Gukesh hasn't taken yet, but here he does take on B7. He goes for it. No, but Magnus doesn't go for bishop D7. He decides it is just a pure pawn sacrifice.
No, and that's not a good thing for Magnus. He doesn't have enough compensation. I mean, yeah, the knight is sitting pretty on b4,
Yeah.
but kind of a strange sequence of decisions for the world champion. He takes a lot of time, and this is a big chance for Gukesh in the early going, Danny. I don't want to overstate the
Yeah.
case here, but you've got to try to deliver if you're white.
No, I don't think we're going to be overstating the case at all throughout the whole day if we're saying this is a big moment for Gukesh because he might not get many. You've got to take them, right? You don't swing at the king and miss, as they say. And so I agree. I mean, you can't miss with an opportunity where you've won a pawn. Magnus obviously has some compensation on the b file. Maybe we should highlight that as well as the b2 pawn being backward. And here he comes with the swing to double the rooks. Makes sense. But if you're Gukesh, I think I'm going to give one piece of random advice into the universe. He won't be able to hear me, but I think the main thing is you can't overthink this, Daniel. What we often see here is now he's going to try to be perfect and convert and get himself under time pressure, and somehow Magnus wins his black. We see people do that against Hikaru and Magnus. I think you got to trust yourself and try to play quickly, not trying to be too precise because it is blitz.
Agree completely. He's been doing that so far. I love the way Gukesh is handling this so far. Rook AC1. A mysterious looking move, but the idea is an antidote to d5. In the event of d5, you take it, and then your rook sits on a lovely open file. Now Gukesh says, hey, I don't care about the pressure on the b file. I'm going to checkmate you on the king side. Maybe even a move like rook f3 and pile up those pieces while black's pieces are scattered about the queen side.
I agree totally. And I think that might be, to me, if I was giving the practical advice, bird on the shoulder, that's what you go for, Danya, because you have to take your chances when you get them. And you can't be afraid to go all in, right? Because you may not get another opportunity. Here he goes. I love this. Queen f2, queen g3. Let's go on the king side.
Whoa, that is a sacrifice. Magnus doesn't take on d3. I thought rook f3 might have been a more precise way to start. Magnus follows up with g6, and is Gukesh just going to leave the knight on f5? That is a common sacrifice in these Italian positions. For now, he goes queen g3, pinning the g-pawn. And is Magnus going to duck away onto h7?
But what about knight takes d3? We're going to have to bring back the analysis board, but just to show the obvious lines, because this game is about to get tricky. So if black plays knight takes d3, white has what?
I think just rook cd1.
Okay, and d6 is hanging in the end.
And you could play rook b3 here, but then you lose sight of the f7 pawn. This gets really nasty for black.
Yeah.
So Magnus does indeed play king h7.
Yeah, stopping knight h6 and maybe renewing eventual threats.
Spicy stuff by Gukesh. He just says, hey, Magnus, take my knight. You're going to get ladder checkmated.
I love that move. If you take gf5, rook f5, here comes checkmate on the edge of the board. This is the kind of game, if you're writing up the storybook upset, Rudy takes down Notre Dame. Or what happened in that movie? Did he go to Notre Dame or did he beat Notre Dame? Any Hooters. Okay, so if you're writing the Rudy story, it starts with this type of chess by Gukesh. I know he went to Notre Dame. Calm down. Calm down, everybody.
No, that's a fantastic move. And Danny, it's not just a defensive move. He's preparing to blast open the center with the move d4. And that pawn on d6, that queen on d8. Magnus is falling apart at the seams here. And he's got 45 seconds. Let's see how Gukesh follows this up.
I'm going to say, that's the other thing that you get excited about is on the clock. I love this move d4. I love that you have to put pressure. Magnus is maybe going to be under 30 seconds here in just a moment.
Yeah, but this is where the world champion. But this is where the world champion is so resilient. He just does not die. It doesn't matter how much time he has on his clock. He's going to make Gukesh work for it. And I love how Gukesh is just keeping his knight on f5. It can never be captured as long as the queen sits on g3, cutting off the king.
I love it. I love it. We asked the question when we were reviewing the insights there, what does Gukesh do to get Magnus in tactical positions? That's a type of position Gukesh might want. This is the kind of game you're looking for. This is exactly what you need. Magnus now under 20 seconds. Where's the beef, Gukesh? You got to deliver.
Yeah, where's that crushing blow? Magnus is still pretty solid on the king side. Gukesh continues to pile up his pieces, doubling on the f file. 10 seconds now for the world champion. And Danny, I mean, d takes c5 and queen. No, there's got to be a knockout here. I think just knight h6.
Got to be a knockout.
No,
knight h6. Is knight takes d6 an option?
Queen takes d6. Not
totally. And then there's rook takes f7. There's also just move the knight anywhere, like even h4, because if the queen goes to e6, then you can play d5 and keep the pressure.
Although then the
is there a move like c5?
I think c5 is best. I think you're calling it. I think c5 is totally crushing Danny, because then You play d takes c5 and put the knight on d6. I think c5 ends, and he finds
He
it.
goes for it. Gukesh finds it. 7 seconds for the champ. Oh, and he's all in now. He's like, well, might as well take now.
Rook h5, rook g5, 1-0.
It's over. It's over.
Oh, my lands. What a game.
Gukesh says, not so fast. Go and brush your shoulder off, youngster.
Oh.